morning. Can we try that with a little bit of enthusiasm? Good morning. Thank you. Shall we just close our eyes and pray? Lord, have your way. Please have your way through me, in us. Speak, Lord. Speak in only the way that you can speak into our individual contexts, into our individual situations, and for your glory. In Jesus' name, amen. So, I've been asked to speak this morning about redemption from the King's Palace, and we'll get to that in a moment. What occurs to me is that as we think and as we do the work of redemptive entrepreneurship or redemptive investing, there are a number of principles that we can glean from the Word of God, and it then becomes more potent when we then take those principles and we apply them into the practice of who we are and what we do. As investors who are allocators of capital into ventures, but also I think just as normal everyday people who make decisions every single day about the allocation of our resources. And as I reflect on it, I think for me the best way of understanding it is that God partners with us in order to drive His redemptive mission. It's never ours, it really is God's, and it's God's intent. And we just get to have the privilege of being part of God's divine destiny and plan. It's not God's privilege to be part of our destinies and plans. It's our privilege to be part of God's destiny and plan. And so, what I'll be speaking about today is how the combination of God and ourselves go into society, undertake redemptive work, and hopefully realize redemptive outcomes. Let's start with self. I believe everybody here knows God. Everybody knows God? Okay, great. So I'm not jumping over that because it's not important. Jumping over it because we all know God, and also because I've been given limited time. And these guys are quite strict. So it starts with self. It always starts with self. And, you know, the thing that stands out for me is, you know, God chooses who He partners with, not based on who they are, but based on the state of their hearts. And all across the Bible, you read about people who were qualified for redemptive mission and those who were disqualified for redemptive mission. So I've highlighted just a few. You know, Noah was a just man, perfect in his generation, and he walked with God. Moses was very humble, more than all the men on the face of the earth. Joshua, youthful, but full of the spirit of wisdom. Gideon came from the weakest clan, the least of his father's house, but yet he was a mighty man of valor. And what stands out to me about people who get selected for redemptive mission is that there's always that something distinct about them. The Bible will mention that these are their characteristics, but there was this one thing, whether it was valor, whether it was faithfulness, whether it was humility, that there's that one thing that sets them apart from their generation for these redemptive missions. And I guess as I reflect on that, I often wonder, when God looks down and He is appointing people for His redemptive mission and appointing His partners for His redemptive mission, what will He see in my heart that says yes, qualified for the redemptive mission at hand? And the state of our hearts is important because from the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks and the hands work. quite often it's actually, if you want to understand the state of your heart, look at the state of your works. Look at the nature of your works, and then work your way backwards, and it will tell you and inform a lot about what the state of the heart is that underpins that work. It's not about what we call the work. It's not that I call the work redemptive work, that it becomes redemptive work. It's about the wellspring from which it flows. And of course, we also then, throughout the Bible, we learn about people who were disqualified from redemptive mission. And there are a range of them, from Cain, who prioritizes ritual over righteousness, from the Israelites, who could not cross over the Jordan because they were not wholehearted in their devotion with God. I find that particularly provocative, this idea of wholeheartedness. God desires to see us wholehearted in what we do. This work and this redemptive mission is not a side hustle. God expects people who are wholehearted. And what does it look like for us to be wholehearted in this redemptive mission? In Gideon's army, God says, well, those that are fearful and afraid, let them depart. It's interesting that he would raise that before they've even seen war and battle. Seems God understood that for this mission, you are going to be confronted by fear. Is that the work that needs to be done is not work that maintains the status quo. It is work that puts you in direct confrontation with the prevailing powers and even threatens your well-being. And so if you're afraid, then turn back. This one is not for you. With Saul, he says, you have not kept what I commanded you. You have not remained obedient to what I have commanded you. Where does the impetus for our redemptive mission comes from? Does it come from us being provoked by, problems, or does it come from what God has said that we should do? And if we are being obedient, why is it so comfortable? So God has this funny way with some of us that he only ever presents things that we are comfortable to do. He never asks us to move out of our comfort zones. He never asks us to go into territories that we're not comfortable with. For some of us, some of us really have it good with God. But quite often when I see the people in the Bible who are called for redemptive mission, they are called to step out of particular comfort zones. And it is obedience that becomes the first step. The obedience to step out of the familiarity and the comfort and the relational comforts and the financial comforts and so on. The obedience to step out, to overcome fear, and to go and do what the Lord has sent you to do. And so we meet a gentleman called Moses. He is in exile, he's run away. He's at a burning bush, or a burning bush all of a sudden emerges. And a conversation starts with God, and I always describe this as the first recorded strategic planning session. Because there you start to see God outline the framework for redemptive mission. And it's quite extensive and there's a lot to draw from it, but I just want to highlight 3 things. Before God says, I'm about to go and undertake this redemptive mission on behalf of the Israelites, before he says anything, he says, I have surely seen the oppression of my people who are in Egypt. And I have heard their cry, for I know their sorrows. The genesis of this redemptive mission starts with an empathetic consciousness, an awareness of who these people are. They are my people. They are in Egypt. They are not the poor. They are not some statistics. They are not the previously disadvantaged. They are God's people. What do we see when we undertake redemptive mission? What are we seeing? Are we seeing problematic statistics, or are we seeing God's people? He calls them out by name and location. It's not a generalized thing. Not, oh no, I'm about to undertake this thing for the oppressed of the world. No, my people who are in Egypt. Specific, not distant. How often do we create distance from the people so that then we don't have to exercise as great an extent of empathetic consciousness? Do we know the faces and the names and the lives that sit on the other side of these redemptive works that we say we want to undertake? Do we know the names of the people who are in the photos that we use when we're going to raise those funds? And have we heard their cries? It strikes me that, and even as I was just preparing, that I think the challenge here is, what do we see? What do you see? Who do we hear from when we're undertaking these redemptive missions? And what informs our knowledge of what to do? The first thing God says is, I have seen the oppression of my people, not just my people, their oppression. And I know that we live in a world where, for too long, oppression has been used as something to bludgeon people with, to guilt them. And so it becomes very easy for us to decide to opt out and to refuse to see the oppression. And so a lot of us then go out, not willing to see the oppression, but just full of hope about what is possible. See the opportunity and not the oppression. And yet God starts out by seeing the oppression. See the oppression of God's people. And so when our hearts are in the right place and God has selected us, then He sends us into society. He sends us into a fallen society. He sends us into a complex society. He sends us into a society that is filled with contradictions. He sends us into that society. This image might be familiar to many of you. It was taken by Johnny Miller, who's a photographer who actually takes these types of images all across the world. It speaks to a very familiar pattern in South Africa. The challenge with this pattern is that it wasn't meant to be this way, and it wasn't always this way. If we were to zoom in a little bit, we would also see that the patterns of who is in the different places are very stark. It wasn't meant, this is not a natural occurrence. There was God's plan, and then there was man's distortion of God's will that created this pattern. And let's be clear, which is, I think, the challenging thing about this pattern is that these two places are interdependent. The left-hand side does not get to live and exist the way it does if the right-hand side is not forced to live and exist the way that it does. We know this as South Africans and so on because, whenever we travel or friends of ours move, emigrate, one of the first things you'll often hear if you have conversation for long enough is, we don't have help here. Oh no, we can't afford it. Oh no, it's too expensive. We don't have help here. This idea of help is just a foreign notion. I have a friend who moved to Sweden, CEO. And I said to him, just get your EA and my EA to chat and let's set up time. He said, I don't have an EA. Yeah, it's not a thing here. There's a certain group of people that has to live within a certain parameters of standard of living that then make it possible for other people to be able to maintain their standard of living. And we hide sometimes behind things like, minimum wage. We can't stand the government, but when it brings up minimum wage, we're like, yeah, no, sure. I'm not talking about you, I'm talking about me. I live on that side as well. So this isn't just a you thing, it's an us thing. And so as people who are called for redemptive mission, we're called to be pattern breakers. We're not called to make poverty more comfortable. We're called to drive the eradication of poverty. But it all comes down to what do we see, and what have we heard, and what do we know when we look at this picture? What went through your heart when you saw this picture? Was it anger? Was it resignation? Was it irritation? That's an important data point, I think, for all of us in our reflections. You say, what went through my heart when I saw this picture? When I see this play out in various different places, what do I see? And what informs what I see? What have I heard about the existence of this pattern, and what has informed it? What do I know about this pattern, and what has informed it? Has it been informed by a politician? Has it been informed by understanding and knowing the people there? What has informed my view of this? Why can I drive past this? Why can I fly in and see this and keep it moving like it's an ordinary day? What's happening in my heart? I think about this as the Barabbas phenomenon. Before the governor, the people are baying for blood. The governor is under pressure. He has to release someone at this time of festivity. Jesus is there. He knows that there's something wrong about this picture. There's jealousy that's involved here. And he asks, whom do you want me to release to you? And they say, release Barabbas. The murderer, the insurrectionist, release him. And put Jesus in there. And what should I do with Jesus? Crucify him. There's a cost to be paid for the freedom of those that are on the left. And quite often, it is those that are on the right that have to pay that cost. The freedoms that we get to enjoy on the left are paid for with the sanity and sobriety and the poverty of the people on the right. So what are we to do as people who are then called for redemptive mission? I would suggest a few things. First, we need to distinguish between where we've been sent versus who we've been sent to do it for the benefit of. Quite often, we see the manifestation of this pattern and those that bear the brunt of the manifestation of this pattern, and then we immediately rush to intervene in their context. We don't rush to intervene in the context in which these patterns are being reinforced. Just because God has sent you to go and intervene on behalf of someone, it does not mean that person should be the target of your intervention. If God has sent you to intervene for the people on the right, it does not mean that is where you are meant to go and intervene. And yet there's a discomfort there because where we are the people on the left. And so if I'm going to have to intervene there, that means I'm intervening and I'm confronting and I'm engaging my people. I'm engaging my places of comfort and relationship and safety and sustenance. That's where I'm having to go and pattern break. And so self-preservation kicks in and it becomes difficult to break this pattern because we keep going to intervene in the wrong space. It's also important, I think, for us to always be mindful that it's not every distinguished table that we are invited to sit at that we ought to eat from. A lot of the time we're preserving our seats at these distinguished tables on the left. And God has created the opportunity for us to sit at these tables on the left, or these tables at a trigger investors conference, or these tables with LPs somewhere. But He has sent us not to eat from those tables. But then it gets comfortable, and the indulgences become enjoyable. And then we lose sight of our redemptive mission. And so it's important for us to remember that Moses was sent to Pharaoh's court. He was not sent to the Israelites' camp to set up a soup kitchen. When Moses was sent for his redemptive mission, he wasn't sent to the Israelites. He was sent to Pharaoh's court. Let's remember what Pharaoh's court represented for him. This wasn't a stranger. It is the place in which he was raised. People who had shown him great generosity and kindness at a time when his life was in danger. And God sends him there. Not to the Israelites, but there. And we see this pattern play out all across the Bible. I'm not going to go through it in detail because of time, but you see that consistently God sends His people. He sends them to the seat of power, where these patterns are reinforced. He sends Nathan to David, King David, and he says, "You are the man." He says, "You are the man that I'm speaking about when I'm telling you this parable." You can go read up on it. And of course, we also know that Jesus says to the rich young ruler, "Yes, I see you've done all of these things. You've obeyed the law. Well then, how about let's sell all your belongings, give to the poor, take up your cross, and follow me." That is the essence of the heart and the posture of going into redemptive mission, wholeheartedness. And it says this young ruler leaves almost half depressed. He didn't like hearing that from God. He didn't like hearing that from Jesus because he had so much vested in his physical possessions. And of course, in our paradigm, we then come up with great words to protect us from this mandate. We call it capital preservation. I've been called to be a good steward. And here Jesus says, no. Sell your goods. Give to the poor. Take up your cross and follow me. He doesn't say, bring your goods and come follow me so that it can sustain my work. Your goods are no good here. Sell them, give to the poor, take up your cross and follow me. It occurs to me that you cannot both carry the cross and carry your goods. One of them has to be put down. And then we go into the redemptive work. And I like this model by praxis, and praxis speaks a lot about this redemptive mission, and they're very good about distinguishing between what's exploitative, what's ethical, and what's redemptive. And Ken Myers, who's a journalist, says culture is what people make of the world in both senses. Again, not enough time to speak about it, but what he's speaking about in both senses is what we make in the world and what we make of the world. What do you make of this world? What do you make of those divisions? That is culture. Our work of our redemptive missions are about transforming culture. What is culture? Patterns of repeated behavior. So when we're called for redemptive mission, we're called to disrupt patterns of behavior through the things that we make and through how we make sense of what's happening in the world, how we make sense of the inequalities we see and the poverty we see. How do we make sense of it? Is it informed by a political paradigm? Is it informed by an understanding of how God sees it? Are we seeing a government responsibility, or are we seeing a mandate for ourselves? And so in meaning making and material making, we then establish culture. The things that we do every single day shape culture. And God calls us to stop what we're doing and to stop what we're becoming while we do it. To stop what we're doing and to stop what we're becoming while we do it. And so the work of redemption, as we look at it, is the process of breaking these repetitive patterns of thinking, doing, and the outcomes that reinforce the distortion and the oppression. When redemption is done right, from what we can see in the Bible, is that you buy someone or something back, and in so doing, you accord them a new name, a new function, a new destiny, and a new relational positioning to you and others. If you have done the work and the poor remain the poor, have you done redemptive work? If the power relationship between you and those that you are doing the work on behalf of remains intact after you have done your work, have you done redemptive work? Because when Jesus did his redemptive work for us, we became co-heirs with him. We don't get to remain as the generous philanthropists and they remain the beneficiaries forever. True redemption puts us on the same level. And then we get to the redemptive outcome. And I ask myself, if it's not chain breaking and if it's not culture making, then is it redemptive investing? If the investment does not break chains and accord people new names, new destinies, new relational positioning to us, is it redemptive investing? And so as we think about being redemptive investors, I think then the provocation to all of us, including myself, is what does it look like to invest in a way that drives real, authentic, and meaningful redemption? And so as I wrap up, I think there's a set of questions that we get to ask ourselves. Who we're investing with and who we are not investing with is an important question for us to ask. How we are making meaning of the context, the risk, and the opportunity. Why we are investing. What we are investing in versus what we are not investing in. What does the profile of your portfolio look like? What does the profile of your entrepreneurs look like? Is it a profile that is natural occurrence according to God? Or is it a profile that is reflective of man's distortion of God's will, and what is playing out is a repetition of patterns of past sin by man? What does that profile look like? Who we are investing in versus who we are not investing in. Who aren't you investing in? I hear who you're investing in. Who aren't you investing in and why? Where are we investing and where are we not investing? What outcomes are investments actually generating? How are the benefits of our investments being distributed versus not being distributed? What cultures are our investments breaking, reinforcing, or making? How are we engaging or partnering with those that we are investing in and or for or around? What is being sacrificed? To what extent and by who? How is power allocated and exercised? How do we engage with our portfolio companies? Do we become the God in their lives? Do they tremble and fear at our sight because of the way that we exercise our power? What's the cost? What is the cost of the investment, and who is bearing it and how? For a long time, and I know a lot of redemptive work has been done in this very area, but for a long time, the cost of the glasses of wine that you and I get to drink was being borne by the people of these communities in the form of their sobriety, because they were paid with a DOP system, and a lot of redemptive work has been done in that regard. They carried the greatest cost. They carried the most persistent cost. What is the cost of and how are we communicating and reporting about our investing and our investments? So 3 questions that I'd like to leave us with. How different are the answers, our answers to these questions relative to the answers that traditional impact investors or ESG investors would give to them? How different are your answers to these questions relative to just typical ESG investors or impact investors? Secondly, how different should our answers be if we are truly and meaningfully to shape culture that is characteristic of redemptiveness in our churches, in our community, in our nation, and our world? And lastly, how different should our answers be? How different should our answers, the people in this room, be to these questions if the Trigger Investors Conference and the Entrepreneurs Conference of 2026 and beyond is going to look, sound, and be radically different from all prior investors' conferences, including this one? What are the decisions we would need to make today that set up future investors' conference and entrepreneurs' conferences to look and sound and be radically different? And so, friends, our work is not done until we see results. And Luke 4, verse 18 gives us at least a sight of what those results might be. And so I think that's all I have to say about that, and I thank you all.